Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. We're going to continue through Hebrews chapter 7. We're going to review verse 11 from yesterday's devotion, but we're going to keep on going to verse 28, the end of the chapter. Here's the text. Now, if perfection came through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest to appear, said to be according to the order of Melchizedek, and not according to the order of Aaron? For when there's a change of the priesthood, there must be a change of the law as well. For the one these things are spoken about belonged to a different tribe. No one from it has served at the altar. Now it is evident that our Lord came from Judah, and Moses said nothing about that tribe concerning priests. Has it ever dawned on you that Jesus never tended the altar at the temple? That he totally could have walked right into the Holy of Holies, but never did in the biblical narratives. There's nothing in the Gospels about Jesus stepping in and hijacking the priesthood, because his priesthood, his priestly office, is more akin to the order of Melchizedek than Levi. He's the Son of God himself, and his priestly office comes from an office that God established before the Levitical priesthood even existed. There's no recorded death date for Melchizedek. I do not believe that Melchizedek was a Christophany. I do not believe that Melchizedek is physically immortal. I think that his priesthood never expired, and it predates the Levitical priesthood. The author of Hebrews has argued that Abraham himself, progenitor of every Levite, made an offering, a tenth of all he had in his plunder, from quelling the rebellion against King Chedorlaomer and holding up his end of the bargain. In Genesis 14, he gave a tenth of that because he saw Melchizedek and he knew this man was from God. He made a tithe offering to Melchizedek, and Melchizedek blessed him. Verse 7 of this text says that the superior blesses the inferior. Abraham is inferior to Melchizedek, and Abraham is the father of every Levite. Then the priesthood of Melchizedek is superior to the priesthood of Aaron and the Levites. That's the argument that's just been made earlier in the chapter. And he's pointing out that we've never seen Jesus tend the altar. The one these things are spoken about belonged to a different tribe. Jesus was the Lion of the tribe of Judah, not the Lion of the tribe of Levi. No one from it has served at the altar. In fact, no one from Judah has served at the altar. This was at the root, I believe, of the schism within the Hasmonean dynasty. Now, it is evident that our Lord came from Judah, and Moses said nothing about that tribe concerning priests. And this becomes clearer if another priest like Melchizedek appears, who did not become a priest based on a legal regulation about physical descent, but based on the power of an indestructible life. So we have this biblical, beautiful history of Melchizedek. It's so brief, and this man is so enigmatic. But one thing we do know is that Abraham took one look at him and knew he was a priest of God, made an offering. It's like the first tithe recorded from Abraham, and that is the precedent set for a priest who's not a Levite. Before there was Levi, there was Melchizedek. For it has been testified, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. This is why we did the Psalms right before we did Hebrews. This is like the third time Psalm 110 verse 4 has been quoted. The Psalms, as we saw in our series, are not just songs. They're prophecies. They're prophecies about Jesus. He's making his argument, the author of Hebrews is making his argument building on the deep reverence that he knew his readers would have for the Old Testament law. And he's speaking in present tense about the functionality of the temple, at least insofar as it just acknowledges that there were sacrifices going on at the temple, but not one of them was atoning for sin. Jesus has done that. In chapter 10, the book of Hebrews is going to become even more offensive than it already is. I mean, to speak this way hierarchically about someone being superior to Abraham, these would be fighting words. This is anathema to Orthodox Judaism. But it's in the Bible. It's what God said. I believe the book of Hebrews is true. He's going to make the statement that it's impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sin. So stay tuned. But he continues to make his case for the greatness of Jesus. Once again, citing Psalm 110, verse 4, knowing that his readers, much like the readers of the Gospel of Matthew originally, would have reverence for Abraham. He writes to a Jewish audience. The Gospel of Matthew is largely originally directed at a Jewish audience to make the Old Testament case that Jesus is Messiah. And now the author of Hebrews is doing something similar. He's arguing from the Psalms that Jesus is that priest in the order of Melchizedek prophesied in Psalm 110, verse 4. He's driving it home emphatically and repeatedly. So the previous command is annulled because it was weak and unprofitable, for the law perfected nothing. But a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. Jeremiah was right. Go figure, right? God was right speaking through Jeremiah, telling them about this new covenant where he puts his law in our minds and in our hearts. Jeremiah was right. Jesus has come. This could lead to antinomianism if read eisegetically. The previous command is annulled because it was weak and unprofitable, for the law perfected nothing. That might sound offensive unless you've read the Pauline letters, that the law is perfect and righteous and good itself. It's the standard, okay? God wrote it, and not one stroke of the pen is going to disappear from it, but not one of us has lived up to it. So it didn't atone for any sin. It establishes sin. Out of obedience for the very sacrificial system that God prescribed, people would make sacrifices and they would go to the Levites. He's not condemning the whole of Old Testament Israel, including probably Moses. Rather, he's showing how the law hasn't atoned for sin. The law establishes what is sinful. And the sacrificial system is symbolic and in faith and in obedience. It proved that the Old Testament believers trusted in God's covenant with Abraham. Their adherence to the law of Moses allowed them to live. The man who does these things will live by them. That's Paul's summation of Old Testament salvation in Romans chapter 10. But now, a new righteousness has come by faith alone. Now, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So the previous command is annulled because it's weak and unprofitable, for the law perfected nothing, but a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. The promise of this hope is immense, that it would enable sinful people like us to draw near to God. None of this happened without an oath, for others became priests without an oath, but he became a priest with an oath made by the one who said to him, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever." This is a continuation of the same verse that he's quoted multiple times already. Psalm 110, verse 4 continues, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever." He's making the argument that Psalm 110 was about Jesus. And it's a strong argument, and there are zero viable alternatives to Jesus. There's not a single other man in the whole Old Testament, not even Boaz, not even Joseph, not even Moses himself, who lives up to this standard like Jesus. He is a priest forever. Because of this oath, Jesus has also become the guarantee of a better covenant. All right, I can see my Jewish friends now, sharpening their ad hominem attacks, try to come at me. I'm your FedEx delivery man. And by the way, like, this hasn't been hidden. It's in the best-selling book of all time. There are more print copies of this than any other book in the world. Hebrews is in the Bible. Guinness stopped counting the Bible when measuring book sales for the best-selling book of all time because it was such a devastating margin in every single category that it became boring. Moreover, you've got this in your pocket right now in multiple translations. You've got this on the internet. I mean, look, you're looking at it right now. This hasn't been hidden. We're not embarrassed of this. We're not trying to cover this up. If you're offended by this, you just haven't read it yet. I didn't write it. So you could attack me all day. But your real issue is with God, who said this. Because of this oath, Jesus has also become a guarantee of a better covenant. Mono-covenantalists. I won't spend too much time on this because I know that it's sort of a fringe thing and it's kind of arguing over the number of angels that can dance on the head of a pin. Mono-covenantalism is this weird form of like Christian knowledge signaling, virtue signaling. And all it really does is prove you haven't read the book of Hebrews. One mono-covenantalist ended up on the panel that edited my first book. And all of his edits were expunged when it came to light that he just didn't know what he was talking about. Because I used this language. I even paraphrased this verse. In fact, he's gonna really double down on this, saying it's a better covenant by far. And that language was considered offensive by this editor, and so that editor doesn't work for Lifeway anymore. It wasn't me who fired him. I just pushed back. It's the only edits I pushed back on because I just knew that they were unbiblical edits. This is offensive to the Jewish people, but God wrote it, so you got to abide by it. The new covenant is better. So says God. Now, many have become Levitical priests since they are prevented by death from remaining in office. There's no record of Melchizedek's death. I don't believe that he's immortal, but Jesus certainly lives forever. And we're talking about the ultimate Melchizedekian priest, the ultimate king, priest, prophet, Jesus. Many have become Levitical priests since they are prevented by death from remaining in office. You can't hold your office forever because you're going to kick the bucket one day. But because he remains forever, he holds his priesthood permanently. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, since he always lives to intercede for them. This just keeps getting better and better. First of all, take this in again in verse 19. God has offered a better hope through which we can draw near to him. Look at what this reveals about the compassionate nature of God, the gracious, merciful, loving, patient nature of God. And now we're told about a better covenant as well. And we're told about a priesthood that is permanent. And while the law, look at this, verse 19, for the law perfected nothing. The law perfected nothing. Now, we're offered a better covenant, a better hope that is able to save completely those who come to God through him, since he always lives to intercede for them. It keeps getting better because this last clause tells us something about what Jesus is doing right now, and it's consistent with what we've seen Bible-wide in our studies, verse by verse through other books, that Jesus himself would intercede for you. We saw Jesus do this in the Gospels. It's a really brief moment between Jesus and Peter, but its implications are immense. What is Jesus up to these days? He is seated at the right hand of the Father, interceding for you right now. We see Jesus warn Peter about something coming down the pike. He is one with the Father. The devil has beseeched God the Father for permission to sift Peter like wheat, but Jesus, while walking the earth in the flesh, tells Peter, but I have prayed for you. And he doesn't pray that Peter would be spared the trial. Jesus knows the Father's going to allow it. And Peter certainly went through the meat grinder, had his biggest, most embarrassing failure yet, 3 times denying Jesus the same night that he promised that he would never deny him. Well, Jesus prayed for Peter because he knew what was coming. You can get a glimpse at this intercessory ministry of Jesus right there in the Gospels. For this is the kind of high priest we need: holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. This reads like a pastoral job description written up by volunteers on a search committee, not one of whom has any decent theology whatsoever at all. We only have one undefiled priest. It's Jesus. We only have one innocent priest. It's Jesus. We only have one truly holy priest. It's Jesus. We only have one priest who is separate from all sinners, and it's Jesus. And then the exalted above the heavens part, I think that even churchstaffing.com would push back on that. I did like a masterclass for G6 allies called Should I Stay or Should I Go? And I spent the whole first hour-long segment convincing them to stay. So, by the way, if you happen to be a pastor and you're thinking, like, should I stay or should I go now? I'm going to go out on a limb and say you should stay. But if you really do need to go, you can always go peruse the job listings written by non-pastors and go, try to explain to them how this actually works. There are a lot of dysfunctions in the search world because they're looking for Jesus as their pastor. He's got to have 33 years experience, but he's got to be in his 20s. And he's got to have a doctorate from an accredited seminary, but he can't talk like that. And also, he's got to be sinless. Right? Never mind the sin of the search team themselves. But look, there's only been one perfect priest. That's Jesus. And he's seated at the right hand of the Father praying for you right now. He doesn't need to offer sacrifices every day, as high priests do, first for their own sins, then for the sin those of the people. He did this once for all time when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priest men who are weak, but the promise of the oath, which came after the law, appoints a son, capital S, who has been perfected forever. The promise of the oath which God made. God swore. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. It's a prophecy, centuries before the birth of Jesus, fulfilled by Jesus and Jesus alone. And by the promise of that oath, which came after the law, it appoints a son, the Son of God, who has been perfected forever. And again, the author of Hebrews' use of the word perfect always employs the Greek word that speaks to completion. Jesus has completed the priesthood, and his work is vastly superior to the work of any of the Levitical priest ever. God now, through this perfect priest of the order of Melchizedek, who offered himself once and for all, he has completely saved those who come to God through Jesus. And Jesus is praying for his believers. Jesus is such a vastly superior priest. He's praying for you right now.